You are about to take part in a time-traveling road trip through pop culture. A road trip with a clear destination and many stops along the way. This is but one act of one chapter of the serialized journey.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Bullshit! Bullshit!
When we last left off, we indulged in some mellow 70s gold, met the cockiest anachronistic medieval rogue in recent memory, revisited cinema's most beloved boozed-up married couple, and unceremoniously dumped an incredible melting protagonist in the trash. This week, we wrap up our recap of MST3K's shortest season with king of the Italian mockbuster Enzo G. Castellari's endless warnings to leave the Bronx, ray gun-toting lizard people, Stanley Kubrick's super slow cosmic poetry, and a definitive end to the saga of the Satellite of Love. Kinda. As always, I am Ryan Rodriguez, and you are stuck with the Coolness Chronicles Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Episode
Chapter 10, Staring into the Abyss, Act 4, Star Child Diaper Duty. Well, we're in the home stretch, folks. The final 2 episodes of Mystery Science Theater as we know and understand it. It was bittersweet revisiting these experiments, it always is, because the person I consider the heart and soul of the series was about to jump ship. But when God cancels a show, he opens a window, or something to that effect. I don't get religion. We have at least an hour before we become non-corporeal entities and float off into the cosmos, and boy, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you are in for a surprise. So let's ease into it. When you think of Italian cinema, what's the first thing that materializes in your mind? Fellini? Spaghetti westerns? Cinecittà? Dario Argento? Bicycle thieves? My train of thought always goes directly to mockbusters. You probably already know this if you're a longtime listener, as we covered the subject quite thoroughly in Chapter 4 when we discussed Film Ventures International and the grift they pulled on the American movie-going public. If there was a popular American film in the 1970s or 1980s, you can bet your bottom dollar that some Italian producer capitalized on its success by making an unofficial, unauthorized sequel or remake. Dawn of the Dead, Zombie 2. The Exorcist, Beyond the Door. Star Wars, Star Crash. Most, but not all of these, are, simply put, trash. The bare amount of effort put into a practice that is inherently lazy already. But some of these films and the filmmakers responsible pick the most off-kilter elements to plunder, and in the process give birth to something truly odd that resembles a movie you've seen before in an abstract sense, but scrambled and stitched together in a way that defies any logic you could bring to it. That brings us to Enzo G. Castellari. Castellari is not primarily a rip-off artist, having directed everything from gritty cop thrillers and well-respected spaghetti westerns like Keoma to comedies and war pictures, chief among them The Inglourious Basterds, which was the inspiration for Quentin Tarantino's 2009 film of the same name, from 1966 to 1979. But in 1980, he started a 3-year run that will be familiar to anyone who has visited the RiffTrax site recently. It began with Great White, aka The Last Shark, a beat-for-beat clone of Jaws that was a phenomenal success in the US before Universal Pictures sued, and it left theaters after only a month. 1990, The Bronx Warriors, 2 years later, itself an amalgamation of Escape from New York and The Warriors, The Road Warrior-inspired New Barbarians, covered by riff tracks and known stateside as Warriors of the Wasteland, not to be confused with Season 5's Warrior of the Lost World, and culminated in the 1983 sequel to Bronx Warriors, Escape from the Bronx, which was featured as the fifth experiment in MST3K's seventh season. But before we officially escape from the Bronx, let's go back to 1979 for some context. And by context, I mean a film that was liberally pilfered to bring it into realization, and that requires a reverse detour.
These are the armies of the night.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
The Furies. The Boppers. The Hi-Hats. The Lizzies. The Turnbull ACs. The Gramercy Riffs.
Riffs! Yeah, right!
And these are the Warriors.
We know about the Warriors. They're a heavy outfit.
They're from Coney Island.
Warriors? You guys are the big dudes, huh?
Now they're in the Bronx,
We're going back.
27 miles behind enemy lines.
It's the only choice we got.
Between them and safety stand 20,000 cops and 100,000 sworn enemies.
I want them all. I want all the warriors.
They've got one way out. They've got one chance. They've got one night. The Warriors.
The Warriors was shot in the contemporary hellscape of late 1970s New York, but has all the atmosphere of a post-apocalyptic alternate universe, all done without extensive production design, and accordingly is what I see in my head when I close my eyes and picture that time and place, despite never having been there nor having been alive at the time. It tells a very simple story about a multi-ethnic gang, in case you're not aware it's a movie, framed for murder, and on a long night's journey into day from the Bronx to their Coney Island home base, dodging rival gangs like the Lizzies, the Riffs, and the Baseball Furies along the way. The Warriors has endured throughout the years as a cult favorite for its imaginative yet sparse world-building, undeniably unique tone, and eminently quotable dialogue.
Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play.
Sidebar. Unfortunately, this recognition didn't stop director Walter Hill from pulling a George Lucas in 2005 and going back to dick around with his film with the intention of bringing it closer to his quote-unquote original vision, a phrase that has lost all meaning, of a comic book brought to life. This is naturally communicated through new ugly digital transitions, text boxes, and other assorted unnecessary nonsense. End sidebar. 3 years after the release of The Warriors, Enzo Castellari and his producer Fabrizio De Angelis boiled it down to its base elements, New York as hell, and gangs that accessorize, then did very little to construct anything past those elements. The result was 1990 The Bronx Warriors, a movie that, like the 2001 Planet of the Apes remake, shoots its entire wad in the opening credits, various weapons and accoutrements being wielded to a funky beat, creating something stylish and cool, and immediately craps out once the ostensible story begins. In In 1990, the Bronx is a no man's land where law and order are outdated concepts. Why? Doesn't matter. Don't think about it. An heiress to an arms manufacturer flees to the comparatively prosperous Manhattan and ends up caught between the Zombies, a gang that wears roller skates, and their nemesis, the Writers, led by the enigmatic Trash.
Where do you come from?
Manhattan.
You want me to take you back there?
No,
You know, this is the Bronx.
I know. I came here purposely. Anywhere away from them. It's better.
But nothing is worse than this hellhole.
Yes, the lead of the movie is named Trash, because the future is a dangerous place where irony has long been forgotten. Trash shepherds the heiress to relatively safe ground and protects her from a psycho mercenary, Hammer, who is tasked with retrieving the heiress and destroying everything that comes in his path. Like many other entries in the exploitation subgenre, it's occasionally visually interesting but only works in fits and starts, usually with a bit of the ultraviolence is called for. Although if you've ever wanted to see gangs dressed like extras from Flash Gordon doing battle with background dancers from a chorus line, complete with studded hats, silver tops, and tap pants, your sad ship has come in. The cast boasts such big names as Fred, I'm Here for a Paycheck and a Free Roman Vacation Williamson, that one guy from Peyton Place, and a very depressed-looking Vic Morrow who was unable to dub his voice in post-production because shortly after filming he was killed on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie. But the real star of the show is Mark Gregory, aka Marco Di Gregorio, as the most accurately named protagonist in film history, the aforementioned Trash. Despite being very unappealing and exceedingly dead-eyed, Trash has quite the rabid fan base, which may be partially attributable to the fact that Gregory himself disappeared off the face of the earth less than a decade after making his feature debut in Bronx Warriors, and is still being doggedly tracked down to this day. According to Castellari, 1990, its sequel, and The New Barbarians were all written together in a 6-month period, which sounds about right. The movies get progressively, or regressively, less ambitious with each new production, the quality significantly diminished, the distinction between originality and outright robbery more nebulous. This leads us to the partial inspiration is of course in air quotes there, for both 1990 and its sequel, 1981's Escape from New York. Directed by John Carpenter during his absolute creative zenith, he would direct The Thing, perhaps his masterpiece, the following year, the somewhat underrated Christine the year after, and the devastatingly underrated Starman the year after that. Escape from New York introduced the world to a legendary protagonist even more impactful than Trash, if you can believe it, Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken.
I'm not a fool, Plissken.
Call me Snake.
I told you I wasn't a fool, Plissken.
Call me Snake.
We heard of you too, Plissken.
Call me Snake.
That's not funny, Plissken.
Call me Snake.
We'd make one hell of a team, Snake.
The name's Plissken.
No more Snake Plissken.
When I get back, I'm gonna kill you.
You gonna kill me now, Snake?
I'm too tired. Maybe later.
And remember, once you're inside, you're on your own.
Oh, you mean I can't count on you?
No.
Good.
You're Snake Plissken, ain't you?
What do you want?
I thought you were dead.
Heard you were dead.
I heard you were dead.
Plissken may be the coolest character of the 1980s, and definitely not the unauthorized inspiration for Metal Gear Solid, is a seething, one-eyed ex-Special Forces underground legend in the far-off dystopian future of 1997, offered an unequivocal pardon by the government for past crimes if he retrieves the president from the Big Apple, which has long been a lethal prison colony, within 22 hours. He reluctantly takes the gig and makes his way through the seedy underworld of a metropolis gone to shit, bumping heads with adversarial former associates, getting roped into death matches, and foiling the machinations of the Duke of New York, who plans a mass exodus from the city through the heavily mined Queensboro Bridge using the most British-American president ever as a human shield. It's a film that should, given its quote-unquote futuristic concept and basic story, have become silly and irrelevant in a short amount of time. but instead it endures, almost timeless in a way. Carpenter, with his co-writer Nick Castle, built a universe that operates on bizarre nightmare logic and expertly surrounds the iconic cycloptic center of said universe with an ensemble of unique character actors, everyone from Harry Dean Stanton and Tom Atkins to Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Borgnine, and Donald Pleasance, playing the aforementioned foreign commander-in-chief, who is perhaps the greatest meltdown in all of cinema. If anything, age has helped the film, because it stands as a constant reminder that there was a time, long since past, where small efforts like this could make a dent in the cultural narrative and remain useful as a point of inspiration. Speaking of inspiration, this finally brings us to the Mystery Science episode we've been building to, Enzo G. Castellari's entirely original opus, Escape from the Bronx, Experiment 705, retitled Escape 2000.
The authorities declare the Bronx a high-risk zone. There's only one alternative: destroy it. Destroy it. Escape from the Bronx.
Several years after the conclusion of 1990, The Bronx Warriors, the General Construction Corporation has decided that the Bronx must be torn down to make way for the city of the future. Why is the Bronx prime real estate? How would a futuristic city improve this situation? All valid questions that will not be answered during the course of this movie. If the current residents don't want to part ways with their smoking crater of a home, exterminators in silver jumpsuits and motorcycle helmets called disinfestors will bombard them with loudspeaker warnings.
You are ordered to leave the Bronx. I repeat, you are ordered to leave the Bronx.
I forgot my luggage.
The area has been declared uninhabitable and destined for demolition. Leave now and leave peacefully.
Okay, you convinced me.
The government guarantees to relocate all of you in comfortable, up-to-date, alternative accommodation. Leave the Bronx.
Even though this is Italy, leave the Bronx.
One dumb concept, endlessly restated. Those that resist these warnings are subject to a hail of gunfire, ruthless gassing, and immolation at the business end of a flamethrower.
Looks like most of the buildings have left the Bronx.
Sir, by now I'm sure you've heard about our Leave the Bronx program.
Abandon all buildings.
The Bronx has hit an iceberg and is sinking.
Oh, the Bronx is something which I should have left.
Sidebar. Like 1990, Escape from the Bronx was at least partially shot in the titular location. Italian film productions require that at least 50% of all financed films be shot in the motherland, so all the exteriors are in the Bronx and all the interiors are in Italy. End sidebar. If the GC Corporation thinks that they can take down this lawless urban wasteland completely unchecked, they are sorely mistaken. The Bronx is lousy with packs of resilient people and surviving gang members from the previous movie who will resist all oppression. You might even call them a rebel alliance, were you not afraid of copyright infringement. The rebel, let's call it resistance, is led by Dablone, referred to in the theater as Toblerone, and played by Antonio Sabato, father of right-wing asshole actor Antonio Sabato Jr. Dablone's primary character traits consist of yelling obscenities at the top of his lungs and following up said obscenities with the outlandish fits of hysterical laughter. He's a real delight.
Those bastards, those motherfuckers, they still try. Get out of the Bronx, they say. We got the solar houses and the chanting in New Mexico waiting for you. Hijo de puta! The disinfestors will never come here.
If you don't do something down here to protect yourselves, you'll be in trouble.
Did you hear that, boys? We are in trouble!
You think it's funny? Well, she's right, you shit.
Hey, cut the crap. What about you? And your plans to stay out in the open? You think you can stop them, huh?
Listen, thief of Baghdad. You really think you guys are safe down here?
Baby, they will never come down here. They know very well we'll bust their asses if they do.
Strangely, Antonio is the only foreigner who was allowed to dub his own voice, despite his accent being decidedly not from the Bronx. Huh. The president of the GC Corporation has somehow been able to keep the ongoing mass genocide under wraps, and he takes advantage of this cloud of secrecy by holding a press conference to introduce his concept model for the new Bronx, which also features a portion of the old Bronx that seems to have been constructed out of styrofoam, egg cartons, and dirt. Basically, if you remember how the exteriors of the Gizmonic Institute looked like in Season 1, this was worse. The conference is disrupted when a lone reporter decides to speak truth to power and question the president.
Why the hell don't you admit you're deporting and killing them? That you're causing accidents and epidemics to eliminate those people who put up the slightest resistance to being thrown out of their rightful homes?
Get her out of here.
But I'm with Parade.
Hands off, you fascist.
A fascist Italian? Come on.
She's quickly kicked out, so she retreats to the Bronx, which is actually her home turf, and joins DeBlone's loosely organized resistance. But you're probably thinking, what about Trash? This is a sequel after all, and he's the only character who appears in both movies. Well, Trash is living a muted, solitary life, no longer the captain of his particular gang. But when the disinfestors arrive at his parents' apartment, the living room of which is adorned with a large black and white poster of their son for some reason, and torch them alive like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, Trash heeds the call to action and goes on a revenge mission. The target of his wrath? Former prison warden, current psychopathic finicky stormtrooper, and silly name possessor Floyd Wrangler, played by a very game Henry Silva.
Henry Silva, supplied by Renta Silva.
Henry Silva, for all your Silva needs.
Trash joins DeBlone's unified underground to offer his ill-defined services, and the reporter lady proposes a plan: kidnap the president of the GC Corporation. The abduction goes off without a hitch, and soon Trash and some of the other assorted non-characters are racing through the sewers of the Bronx in a choppily edited game of cat and mouse, while the resistance rises to the surface and takes the fight to the disinfestors. War is waged, and we get a fuck ton of slow-motion shots of people being shot or blown up and doing an improbable forward flip. This is a concerning obsession of Enzo Castellari, not unlike Frank Miller and his fetishized buxom women adorned with swastikas. One wonders if he could possibly create something without them. Sidebar. Speaking of swastikas, a lot of the Bronx resistance have SS insignia and swastikas on their clothes. Trash himself has a rebel flag on his jacket. And if you're trying to make me empathize with their plight, your costume designer has failed you. I say burn the Bronx down and salt the earth. End sidebar. After a dogged pursuit, the president is shot and Trash gets his revenge on Henry Silva by blowing up his fleeing van with an ordinary handgun.
I wonder what burning Henry Silva smells like.
When the killing is done and the dust is cleared, the viewer is left with only one question. How is it an escape from the Bronx when all the main characters are being forced out? Escape 2000 demonstrates about a quarter of the skill and effort of 1990 The Bronx Warriors. At least that movie had some style, warped imagination, and a fun score. 2000 is an autopilot follow-up, endlessly repetitive and somehow less original than its predecessor, which was stitched together from pieces of much better films. It's not nearly as bad as the next movie featured on the show, but if you removed Henry Silva's Looney Tunes performance, it would be a very close call.
This is Dolby Stereo reminding you to leave the Bronx.
As an episode, Escape 2000 is the one true example of coasting in Season 7. However, everything in the theater is absolute gold, as you've just heard, and it concludes with one of my favorite aspects of a riff, which is the Kevin Murphy sing-along.
Leave Bronx, leave Bronx, leave Bronx, leave Bronx, leave Bronx, huh. Leave Bronx, leave Bronx, boogie, leave Bronx, leave Bronx, baby, leave Bronx, I'll leave Bronx, I'll leave
Okay,
Bronx,
that's good.
leave Bronx,
Watch that thing,
leave Bronx, hey, leave Bronx,
Would you
why
stop
don't
that?
Leave Bronx,
I think we could get... Stop it!
leave Bronx, baby, leave Bronx, come on, leave the Bronx, I'll leave Bronx, when I say leave Bronx, stop it, leave Bronx, stop it, leave Bronx, baby, leave Bronx, someday love will find you,
Okay, all right, that's good.
Servo is backed up by Crow, who wields an electric guitar and continuously pokes Mike in the face with it. Perfect. Mwah. But the host segments are arguably the weakest of the season, partly because they were presented with a perfectly fertile movie to work with, but took almost no inspiration from it. And this isn't a Melting Man issue where they sidestep the movie to get a load of grief off their chests. It's just an issue of, we're almost done with this whole thing and we just want to go home. The episode starts promisingly enough, with Crow hosting a possibly fraudulent charitable auction, the theme to which is from the Little Gold Statue special.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Satellite of Love. And if I could say in all sincerity that it really is a satellite of love this week, as I'm holding my annual auction to help the really good cause.
Wait, what's it for?
It's for the really, sad kids with hurt puppies. Okay, Christy, if you please, how much am I bid for this first item? A penny. A penny. This classic, durable, handcrafted penny. I'll start the bidding at $85. No? Who'll give me a dime? A penny? Let's move on. Christy, get the nickel.
Okay.
As you could probably predict, it falls apart badly and ends with Crow walking off the bridge fuming.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, you cheap, heartless bastards.
When we visit Deep 13, it's this segment that somewhat references the main feature, as Escape 2000 is about forcibly moving people out of their homes against their own interests. Forrester has committed Pearl to a home, but it's not a nursing home. It's more of a playhouse that she's trapped in, with a window that she can yell out of.
Hi, guys. Some bad news. Although I'm sure you could see it coming just as well as I could. I finally had to put Mom in a home.
Clayton!
She'd really been slipping lately, just off in another world. Like last week, she said, "Clayton, where's the coat rack?" Where's the coat rack? We don't even have a coat rack. Well, I guess we do, but she's just, her mind is gone.
Clayton, you get me out of this house right now!
Wow.
There's also a recurring bit about small fires being randomly lit across the satellite that doesn't land terribly well, but it's broken up by unrelated vignettes, like Mike introducing Crow to biofeedback, which Servo has some innate, poorly informed resistance to.
Biofeedback? What a load of crap. It's nothing but snake oil, my friend.
No, it sounds cool.
Come on, you losers. Didn't you see that 160 Minutes episode?
No.
No?
Well, I'm sure there was one, and they found out that biofeedback is a bunch of hoo-ha.
The best moment of the episode sees Forrester try a very late-in-the-game attempt to boost the show's ratings, which feels like a Season 6 idea, despite the fact that the show would be canceled the following week.
Okay, it's like this, Nelson. I've been going over your Arbitron numbers, and despite our efforts to boost your ratings, they've been flat-a-roo. We tried MST nights, but the network just didn't go for it. Frankly, I blame you guys. Us? Why? Why? Because there's no kid. Every successful television show has had a winsome child of some sort. Take your Family Affairs, your Full Houses, your The Avengers.
The Avengers didn't have a cute kid.
Well, split hairs if you will. The point is, we need something cute on the show.
Sidebar. Has there ever been a more accurately named rating system than Arbitron? End sidebar. Escape 2000 also features the final letters segment for the show, although it would be parodied in the 4th episode of Season 8, until the Netflix revival brought it back irregularly. If you didn't already know, Best Brains appreciated fan mail, but including said mail into the show, not so much. Mary Jo Peele had this to say, quote, "There was a time when we actually read letters at the end of the show. That convention gradually trickled away and none of us missed it. The letters were difficult to write around and got in the way of us having any momentum in the last sketch." End quote. This contempt was rarely more evident than in this episode, where Mike is constantly interrupted and eventually gives up without a fight.
Hey, where's Tom Alicious?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe he was ordered to leave the Bronx.
That's not funny.
Sorry. Can we read a letter?
Yeah, let's read a letter.
Okay. Well, I got a nice letter
right,
here
right
from
here.
Ben
Keep it
Hurd,
steady there,
and he
baby.
writes that,
Right, yeah. Easy.
Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
Hey, where'd you get the helicopter?
Oh, it's just a rental. It's not mine.
Well, who's flying it?
I don't know. Some guy works for the company. Rick, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, can we read this letter here?
Yeah, better hurry, because I'm on the clock here.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
It's from Ben Hurt.
Ben
and
Hurt?
He got some Ben Hurt.
Ah, thank
Ben
you.
Hurt, and he's...
The episode also led me on quite the delightful detour.
It tossed him into the streets of Rio Bravo.
Let's briefly touch upon the classic 1959 Western, Rio Bravo.
There'll never be another like Rio Bravo, with its thundering story of raw courage against overwhelming odds, and its once-in-a-lifetime combination of today's hottest star names. You've seen nothing like them together, and here at Rio Bravo, nothing can tear them apart.
Not even a thank you do I get.
Maybe you're right, Stumpy.
Huh?
You're a treasure.
Well,
I don't know what I'd do without you.
well,
Tired, aren't you, John T? I can fix you a nice hot bath.
All I want is a drink.
Then, this is all I can do for you?
This has been one of the few peaceful scenes from the picture Rio Bravo, with John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Walter Brennan here. And a new girl, Angie Dickinson.
Tell him about Ricky Nelson.
Oh yeah, that's me. Come and see us.
Howard Hawks and John Wayne were real men's men, in Wayne's case, racist as well. When they saw Fred Zinnemann's masterful allegorical western High Noon, they both bristled. Wayne was upset about its anti-McCarthy stance, but he was also partially responsible for blacklisting the writer of that film, Carl Foreman, and Hawks was more incensed over the lead character, a sheriff, putting aside the expected front of masculinity and asking for help like a vulnerable human being. The two teamed up to produce an answer, Rio Bravo, from a script co-written by the legendary Lee Brackett, who also wrote The Big Sleep and The Empire Strikes Back. Wayne's character, Sheriff John T. Chance, is tasked with keeping the murderous brother of a powerful rancher in custody at the local jail, while the rancher sends dozens of his men to free his sibling at any cost. Because Sheriff Chance is a paragon of manliness, he will hold his ground and shows no sign of weakness or hesitance in his job. He surrounds himself only with allies he knows he can depend on, and is able to rise above dependence of any kind. Wayne's cohorts include washed-up drunk Dean Martin, who, unlike his co-star, shows a surprising vulnerability in what I believe is his best performance, hands down, teenage rocker and television star Ricky Nelson, legendary character actor Walter Brennan, playing a character that I swear is the inspiration for Old Man McGucket from Gravity Falls, and Angie Dickinson, possibly the most radiant woman ever captured on film, whose dynamic with Wayne is my favorite aspect of the film because she makes him hilariously fussy.
I heard you tell Carlos.
Why did you do it?
You weren't supposed to know about it. Why didn't you just go out and not talk to Carlos?
He didn't wake me up.
Well, don't blame him. That was my fault. All right, nothing happened. Nobody got hurt. You got some sleep. I lost some. Now, I'm tired, and you're mad, and I'm getting mad, so you better go on. I'm gonna get some sleep, too.
Well, you can't go to bed now.
I can't. Well, you just see whether or not I can go to bed now or not. Telling me I can't. What did you say?
The stage. It leaves in an hour.
Well, why didn't you tell me?
I just did.
Hawks' unparalleled filmmaking prowess is on display throughout every second of the film's 140-minute runtime, from the breathtaking Technicolor photography, which has a saturation and level of grain that I'm dying to see projected on film, to the deliberate pacing and perfectly calibrated tone. The climactic prolonged shootout is one of the best, and sustains a level of tension throughout sound and the absence thereof that has all but disappeared in contemporary cinema. American westerns rarely get more lush and engrossing, and if you have the time, it's a trip that I urge you to take. In honor of the next experiment, I had planned on doing a sizable segment on the work of Charles Band, who produced it early on in his career. Unfortunately, I started with Metal Storm: The Destruction of Jared Zinn, and was so angry and so bored, bangry if you will, that I immediately nixed the idea. I had just finished that big Sylvester Stallone film festival that you didn't listen to, and when I first saw the villain of Metal Storm, who looks like the Toxic Avenger with sunstroke, I decided that one marathon of pain was enough for the moment. I considered picking up the research a month later, no go. A month after that, still no. Maybe someday I'll do that episode, but chances are that any podcast that centers around the various empires of Charles Band will likely end with the words, "Goodbye, cruel world." Until then, you'll have to make do with my summary of Experiment 706, 1978's Laser Blast.
This could all be happening right now, somewhere on this planet. It's the story of a UFO that has landed and visitors from a galaxy light years away. It's an adventure unlike anything on this planet. A weapon that might belong to us in the future, but is here now. Laser blast. It's the story of the boy who found it and the girl who tried to help him.
What about the lump on your chest?
And a world that tried to take it away.
They didn't know I knew it.
I want the town sealed off. Just no news leaks. No news, period.
Laser blast. It will blow your mind.
Laser Blast is a failure on virtually every single level. Characters have no development, just vague obstacles and inconsistent goals. Every frame of film has a scummy undercoating that cannot be scrubbed away. Every piece of valuable information is deliberately obfuscated. If you read any subtext or metaphor into it, I can assure you that any and all of those virtues are inside your head. You will receive nothing but pain from it, but you will sacrifice 80 minutes of your life for it. Although, if you trust the word of Leonard Maltin, it's at least a 2.5-star movie. Makes me want to burn my dog-eared copy of his movie guide. We open inauspiciously in the desert, on a shot of a patch of scraggly brush.
And action. Cut. Beautiful.
A man resembling a cosplay deadite is running around like a feral animal with a laser gun attached to his arm that looks more like a t-shirt cannon retrofitted to fire compact discs. Then, lizard-like aliens land and shoot the man and fly away once he disintegrates and leaves behind only the gun and some kind of pendant.
I know what you're thinking. Did I fire 6 Gorloks or only 5?
It's because of these aliens that I can't call Laser Blast a complete failure. They're charmingly crude, stop-motion characters animated by David W. Allen, John Berg, and Randall Cook, and always speak in a made-up language not too dissimilar from the villains of Mars Attacks, without subtitles, so even when their presence in the story is meant to convey information, it does not come across as intended. Though, to be fair, I think Charles Band's only intention was to make a movie with both aliens and lasers and try to convince weaker-minded theatergoers that it was somehow related to Star Wars. Then we meet our protagonist, the lanky and perennially underdressed Billy Duncan.
Wow, and you thought Willie Ames was hot. Whew.
Yeah, I did.
Boy camel toe.
He lives in a washed-out bummer of a small town where the local dumbass cops spend their time smoking confiscated marijuana in their beat-up cruiser, and Eddie Deason is considered an alpha male. Strange place. Billy is a poor, bullied soul whose prospects are grim.
Wow, if there was ignorant talk radio in the 70s, I sure would agree with it.
Makes me glad rural America is dying.
His single-parent mother takes off on vacation without inviting him. His girlfriend's father, played by a spaced-out Keenan Wynn who doesn't look like he knows he's in a movie, won't let him into their house for reasons that are pretty hazy. He's considered lower on the pecking order than a couple of dorks, including the aforementioned Eddie Deason, who try to intimidate him and later attempt to rape his girlfriend. What is a growing boy to do in the face of such unmitigated misery? Wander into the desert, of course, where he finds that laser gun from the opening scene.
After all that, it's Papa Pow.
Once you're over the age of 11, you should not say pow.
Please, stop.
Oh,
Come on.
don't.
Please. No.
I think he's doing Frampton Comes Alive.
It's even worse.
So it's a thing that makes you waltz.
I guess.
Won't he be surprised when he finds out it doesn't go pow, but swish?
After he stops dicking around, he realizes that if he wears the pendant, he can fire the gun. Don't go looking for reasons in this department. There are none. Billy returns to town and resumes his dead-end life. Meanwhile, the aliens from the beginning watch the scene you just saw and determine that they must return to Earth to retrieve the gun. So why did they leave it there in the first place? Good question.
Don't start.
Well, did you?
Please, sir, we've seen Laser Blast.
This is how advanced the aliens are. They can edit the scene down.
Boy, when the movie starts showing you parts of itself, you know you're in trouble.
Later that evening, Billy takes revenge on the jerks who assaulted his lady by blowing up their car with the laser gun. Unfortunately, they're not in it. But the explosion does lure a government agent to the town who investigates the scene and the desert and determines that something supernatural is afoot. Who called the agent? Again, good question. Shortly thereafter, Billy isn't feeling well, so he contacts Dr. Mellon, played by a desperately in need of work Roddy McDowall, whose name is misspelled in the credits. Mellon does his due diligence and discovers a metal disc in Billy's chest, which he safely removes and sends off for analysis. For his troubles, Billy, who is starting to look more like that cosplay Deadite from the beginning, blows up Mellon's car as he's driving home.
Roddy McDowall is Silkwood.
Wow, he's really overdriving his headlights.
Oh no, his car turned into a sedan and crashed and exploded.
We show you the scene to represent what would have happened.
So this is how Roddy McDowall died?
He's not dead.
Oh.
When the redneck cops that lazily patrol the town investigate Billy regarding Mellon's death, he uses the laser gun to blow up their car as well. He calms down long enough to spend some time laying down with his lady, who places the pendant on his chest, causing him to Hulk out and attack her.
So I wonder what the flaw was that kept Leonard Maltin from giving us the full 3 stars.
She escapes, but Billy then goes on a warpath, driving around and blowing up random people and things. The feds show up in a passenger plane and pursue him at a reasonable speed.
This is so Coleman Francis right now.
Billy blows up the plane. Then he blows up Eddie Deason. Then he blows up a crude billboard. Will this madness never cease?
Well, there's just a sign that says Star Wars.
Reminding one of the movie Star Wars.
Oh, I hadn't finished reading that.
Thankfully, the aliens show up to end the movie before it can limp to its 90th minute and shoot Billy, destroying him and the laser gun. His girlfriend weeps over his corpse. Roll credits. If we're going to take away anything from the movie, it's this. If you're picked on, don't go into the desert and obtain an alien laser cannon, a moral that is especially prescient in today's political climate. Mary Jo Pehl, when recounting Laser Blast years later, opined, quote, "The fact that this film was even made proves that anybody can do it. You can find this either inspiring or depressing." End quote. I would add a third option, mystifying. When Laser Blast finally limps to its conclusion, my head is filled with only one thought. Theaters willingly played this? They didn't watch the first 5 minutes and say, "No thanks, not for us"? I know stranger things have happened in the world of cinema, but I certainly can't think of any at the moment. And now we move to the part that I've dreaded for quite some time, the Laser Blast episode. It's such a fun and ambitious 90 minutes, but you can feel the sadness from the cast and crew that permeated it. Not only were they saying goodbye to home and security, they were saying goodbye to one of their own, Trace Beaulieu, who, as I said earlier, is the heart and soul of the program. The send-off they concocted is both a loving tribute to everything the cast and crew had built over 8 years and 7 official seasons, but also irreverent enough to represent the Mad Magazine version of grief. Like saluting the flag with a finger in your nose. I'm not great at analogies. The riffing is absolutely sterling, with some great digressions. My personal favorite involves an improvised song from Servo that Mike takes the opportunity to poke some holes in.
Get around, children, get loud. You can be proud, yeah, be proud. Your Rebel Coach South going to do it again.
So, Servo, exactly what is the South going to do again?
You know, different activities that they have done in the past that they'd like to do again. Now you got me thinking about the South doing it again. It's just the South, okay?
So I just asking.
Okay, just the spirit. All I'll say is it's just Southern pride, Mike. There's no specific act they're going to do again.
That's fine. So, I mean, we shouldn't worry about the South.
Don't just lay off the South, okay? It's not really, it's just a feeling.
So, Servo, I mean...
Oh, look, just lay off. You'll see. When the South does rise again, I'll be laughing. Me!
All right.
There are also frequent references to the then-current theme to Monday Night Football, always uttered when the beefy hairy cop is on screen, as he tenuously resembles Hank Williams Jr.
Now, you keep smoking that, you're going to get us thrown off the force.
Look, are you ready for some football?
Oh, give me a puff.
And I gotta go home and get ready for some football.
Who was that?
I think it's that Bill Duncan.
Bill Duncan kid, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's go get him.
Let's find out if he's ready for some football.
What beats me how you can swallow down a whole hot tamale first thing in the morning.
I just feel like you might not be ready for some football. Well, it's Monday night, a new week has begun. I turn on my TV for some pigskin fun. I see a Super Bowl season here on ABC. The biggest game each week is their specialty. I gotta get ready, make everything right. Monday night football's coming on tonight. Are you ready? Hey. Are you ready? Are you ready, ready? We're ready! Are you ready for some football? A Monday night party? Hey, this is rockin' random Hank. Ready to get the good times started. We've got the teams on the field and we turned up the lights. All my rowdy friends are back for Monday night time.
And of course, Crow and Servo take every opportunity to compare the burned-out life of the lead character to Mike's hazy college days.
It's a sunny day, got a pleasant buzz going. Hey, Mike? Huh? Huh? Oh, yeah. You do a lot of wacky tobacco, Mike? Huh? A lot of Mary Jane? Huh? Jokey, smoky? When you first saw this, you laughed so hard you spilled your bong water, didn't you, Mike?
But for the first time in a long time, as much attention, if not more, was placed on the host segments, which were designed to leave the show in a transitional limbo. If there was a future, there would be options for continuation. But if this was the end, our characters would receive a graceful resolution. Trace was behind the camera yet again, his third effort for the season, and he helps craft some of the host segments that would have signaled a side career as a director, something that would resurface for 2014's The Frank, but that's far, far away. We will get to it, but it's far away. We begin with an innocuous prologue with the bots torturing Mike with jokes involving the title of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, but once back from commercials, the story begins in earnest. It seems that Dr. Forrester's funding has been cut, and he's already packed up most of Deep 13 to move back in with Pearl before he remembers that he still has a man marooned in space.
What? Oh, are you still there? Oh, that's right. I forgot to disconnect the umbilicus. Look out, Mother.
Oh, well, we can see with you.
Huh? You cut the umbilicus? Why?
You can't disconnect the umbilicus.
We'll die. Oh, nonsense. You'll be pulled into Earth's gravitational field. Your orbit will decay. The hull will rupture. You'll burn to a crisp, and then you'll die.
What? You can't do that. We've done everything you've ever asked. We watched every bad movie you sent up here.
Yeah.
Sorry. Bye-bye.
You said you'd let us get back to Earth.
Did I say that? Well, maybe I did. What do you want? I'm evil.
Mike and the bots ponder their uncertain fate while Gypsy re-engages the satellite's thrusters, preparing the group for a trip into deep space before movie sign.
Anyway, guys, your orbit will begin to decay in about 2 hours, so I've downloaded a film from the ship's internal memory. It's called Laser Blast, and Leonard Maltin gives it 2.5 stars. Now what?
Booster engines firing! We now have impulse power!
How did you do that?
I took the governor off.
We have helm, Captain.
Now entering Earth's atmosphere. Hull temperature critical.
Do we have enough power to escape the atmosphere?
We won't have control. We'll be shot into deep space. I got to have more time.
We don't have that time. Get ready to engage warp engines, Mr. Crow.
Aye, aye.
Engage.
Oh, we got movie sign! I didn't engage the thing.
Segment 2 demonstrates the kind of riffraff that space has to offer, something that would be explored further in the seasons to come, as the satellite comes into contact with an anal-retentive space probe with an inferiority complex named Monad.
Get away from me, you little creep!
I will not get away. I have been sent here to destroy imperfections. I find you, the gold unit, to be imperfect.
Yeah, well, smooch my tiny imperfect little...
Well, hey, loser, what it is?
I got one of these nomad satellites on my butt. Seems you can't go hurtling into the void of space without picking up one of these annoying little busybodies.
You are in error. I am not nomad. I am a similar design known as monad. I should destroy you, but I'll give you a mulligan on that one. What? What? Did you say something imperfect?
No, I'm sorry. Go on with your story.
Stop it! Cut it out! Look, if you're going to say something imperfect, say it to the group.
Jim Mallon plays Monad, and he delivers a performance that I played for my brother, who doesn't actually watch the show, trying to convince him that it was Justin Roiland's voice. I succeeded. Fun fact, Monad is a parody of Nomad, a space probe from episode 203 of the original Star Trek, The Changeling. The very next episode of that series, Mirror Mirror, parodied it in Season 6's Last of the Wild Horses. The next half of the episode is dedicated largely to an extended homage, but before we get to it, let's take a brief detour back to 1968 and discuss Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Welcome to voice print identification. When you see the red light go on, would you please state in the following order your destination, your nationality, and your full name?
Moon, American, Floyd, Haywood R.
Thank you. You are cleared through voice print identification.
Thank you.
Quite frankly, we have had some very reliable intelligence reports that quite a serious epidemic has broken out into Cleves.
I know there have been some conflicting views held by some of you regarding the need for complete security.
Something apparently of an unknown origin.
However, I accept the need for absolute secrecy in this.
This is in fact what has happened.
I'm really not at liberty to discuss this.
We thought it might be the upper part of some buried structure, so we excavated out on all sides, but unfortunately we didn't find anything else.
It hasn't been covered up by natural erosion or other forces. It seems to have been deliberately buried.
4-million-year-old black monolith has remained completely inert, except for a single, very powerful radio emission.
3 weeks ago, the American spacecraft Discovery 1 left on its half-billion-mile voyage to Jupiter.
The sixth member of the Discovery crew was the HAL 9000 computer.
Everything is going extremely well.
One gets the sense that he is capable of emotional responses.
Well, hell, I'm dead if I can find anything wrong. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information.
Look, Dave, I can't put my finger on it, but I sense something strange about it.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Do you know what happened?
I'm sorry, Dave. I don't have enough information.
Made radio contact with him yet?
The radio is still dead.
Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? You read me, Hal? Do you read me, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore.
The influence of 2001 looms large over the legacy of Mystery Science Theater, which we touched upon in the very first chapter of this podcast, detailing how its now legendary match-cut transition from a bone in midair to an orbiting satellite millions of years in the future inspired the design of the Satellite of Love. Naturally, the SOL design is closer to a cartoony bone from a Marmaduke comic strip than the rib of a skeletonized zebra. However, we didn't talk much about the film itself, and that's partly because every theory I have or conclusion I've made has been dissected ad nauseum by people that are much smarter than I, and partly because I have a major issue with the film itself, one that probably won't endear me to true cineasts. 2001 is brilliant and haunting, and it possesses images of such grandiose vision and clarity that it remains above all cinematic science fiction that came before and all that will come after. It's cosmic poetry, depicting the epoch of humankind's capacity for innovation and that innovation's insignificance in the face of the infinite and unknowable. The last 30 minutes, in which the lead character enters a Stargate, experiences his entire life and death, and is reborn as a space fetus after contact with a monolith, are hallucinogenic and seismic, and I can say with absolute empirical certainty that with the addition of proper drugs, it's an even more impactful sensory experience. But despite all of that verbal fellatio I just performed on Stanley Kubrick, Arthur C. Clarke, and Douglas Trumbull, when someone mentions 2001, the first thought that will always materialize in my dopey brain is a two-word phrase: fast forward. Every scene feels at least 5 minutes longer than necessary, and it moves at a pace that is generously described as glacial. I understand that Kubrick is attempting to manipulate time in its relation to narrative and challenge our conceptions of what science fiction is and could be as a genre. That said, when I read that he excised 19 minutes from the original cut after its premiere in New York to, quote, speed up the pace, end quote, I don't know how to process that information. This film used to be slower? Is that physically possible? It's not boring in the least, because even when there are gaps between developments of storytelling import, there is some combination of spine-tingling classical composition and unparalleled visual splendor. And something that is interesting cannot be technically classified as boring. I take in 2001 as an experience, one that will still be echoing in my cerebellum until my last synapse refuses to fire. But as a story, I could cut at least a quarter of it. I understand it's heresy to say so, but now that the film is 51 years old, it can take a swipe or two. Speaking of 2001, in terms of production value, Segment 3 of Laser Blast boasts, for my money, the most impressive host segment ever featured on the show.
Man, we've hit a field of star babies, and one of them's got the ship.
Wow, he's upset. He must need changing.
I thought I smelled something.
All right, here's the plan, man. You got to get out there and change that baby's diaper. I'll walk you through the procedure from here.
We're on it, Mike. Let's move.
Go, 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 go.
Go.
Good thing I hung on to this.
Thank you.
Oh, boy, geez, it really stinks out here. Oh, well, hello, little baby. Oh, baby needs changing, doesn't he?
Bro, snap out of it, man. You cannot get personally involved.
Okay, Mike, we've located the diaper tabs. We're pulling the diaper off.
Servo, wait. Huh? Do you have the clean diaper in your hand ready to go?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Mike. Okay, the clean diaper is at the ready. Crow is pulling the dirty diaper away.
Roger, tearing tabs and taking off dirty diaper.
Oh, geez. Oh, no. Nelson, we've got a problem. The diaper leaked. It went all the way up his back. Ugh.
Okay, we'll get you through this. Failure is not an option.
There are several shots of Crow and Servo changing the Star Baby diapers that utilize forced perspective, including one where Crow is a miniature rod puppet in the background, juxtaposed against Servo's normal-sized head in the foreground that is especially impressive and seamless. It's a silly idea for a sketch, but the pure artistry applied to pull it off never fails to impress. And the making Star Babies out of basically Betsy Wetsy dolls, the ultimate kit-bashing tribute. Segment 4 features Mike cross-dressing as Captain Janeway in a desperate bid to regain control of the ship, which is successful, and ends with a rendition of Proud Mary that scares off the bots. It's a silly little lightweight moment that makes the final segment all the more impactful. Let me explain. The satellite has reached the very edge of space, and that arrival comes with unforeseen cosmic knowledge.
See that?
Hey, here we are at the edge of the universe.
Not quite, Mike. It's just a little bit more to go here.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
there, the edge of the universe.
Yep, and I tell you, Mike, it's everything I could have hoped for. For example, all knowledge is clear to me now.
Yeah, you know, and all wisdom and beauty fill me with an abundant light, and all the eternal truths of the cosmos are available with a minimum of effort.
Well, hey, there's God. Maybe not.
Mike, Crow, Servo, Gypsy, and Cambot use their newly gained infinite wisdom and choose to become pure energy, embracing existence on the precipice, which is much lighter and more hopeful than one would expect.
No wonder I've suddenly become aware that I can leave my corporeal body and become pure energy, or pure thought, or reason, or pure any number of things. Here, let's see.
Wow, cool. Let's do it, Mike.
Just let it happen, Mike.
Okay, gotcha.
Down in Deep 13, Forrester begins to have a parallel experience to the David Bowman character from 2001, experiencing his entire life in the span of a few minutes. The monolith at the foot of his deathbed is a VHS tape marked the worst movie ever made, with sculptures of Crow and Servo on either side. And Old Man Forrester is played by Trace Beaulieu's father, Jack. The scene intentionally breaks the traditional single-camera setup of the show in order to properly emulate the final scenes of 2001 and better differentiate it from the rest of the episode, to great effect. Forrester transforms one final time into a star baby, complete with frizzled hair and mustache, and Pearl makes a vow that she's certainly going to break.
Another chance to do it right. Isn't this wonderful, baby?
Oh, poopy.
To reveal too much about myself, I always get emotional at the end of Laser Blast. Not to the point of crying, although that's not very hard for me to do, but there are definite pangs of sadness, amplified by the quality and uncertainty of the final segment. So why did Traceable You leave? He has, for the most part, avoided the question, at least in detail, until a recent oral history from Wired magazine. Quote, "One of the most frustrating things for me was finally realizing that all we were going to produce out of Best Brains was Mystery Science. We had such a beautiful environment, we had our own studio, our own production facility, we had a shop, we could build anything, we had the talented people, but the way it was structured from a business standpoint, it was just impossible to produce anything else and be fair to everyone included. Jim Mallon was going to own any new show produced, and that didn't really sit well with a lot of us." End quote. Trace was the last of the original 3 cast members to leave the show, and he did so on the highest note possible. But the void he left was massive, and even if the show's new home had allowed the Best Brains crew to proceed as usual, it necessitated a large learning curve. The show would, yet again, never be the same. And that is where we end this chapter of the Coolness Chronicles. After some bonus episodes and a very special interview, we'll start a new chapter for both this podcast and MST3K. We're moving to the Sci-Fi Channel, dealing with new cast members and format requirements, a slightly new concept, scrambled xenomorph eggs, and a planet where apes evolved from men. It's a madhouse.
I say shut up! It's a madhouse! A madhouse!
All that and much, much more as we continue to chart the history and legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Thank you to everyone involved in making MST3K for everything they've contributed to my life and to culture as a whole. Double thanks for writing the episode guide that I will quote frequently in this season of the pod. I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. If you want to support the artists who made this wonderful show, many episodes are available on VOD at rifftracks.com. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source, and share it with anyone you can, any way you can. This has been the largest and most fulfilling endeavor I've ever seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Have questions or comments, want to be on the show, or is there anything I missed in this particular chapter? Contact me on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan or on our Facebook page, and keep on the lookout for updates. And now we have a Patreon page. Soon the bonus episodes between Tuesdays will be exclusive there, in addition to a big interactive parallel project that I'm planning for 2020. If you want to be part of the fun, just go to patreon.com/coolnesschronicles. This month's bonus episode is all about the lost MST3K short Assignment Venezuela, with a detour into the history of Apocalypse Now. Good, weird stuff. Special thanks to all of our lovely patrons, Bill M., Christopher H., Tracy R., and Christopher J. Until next time, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always, Coolness Chronicles is written, produced, and edited by Ryan Rodriguez. Executive producers are Tracy Rodriguez and Luis Rodriguez. Original music by Bildschirm. Please visit bildschirm.bandcamp.com for more information.